I see great people in the room, old and new faces, a lot of old faces that have followed us all through the continent, and we're really excited to have you here with us today. Africa, as you know, is bigger than a geographic location, and it's rich in natural resources, cultural diversity, and human potential. Philanthropy has always played a crucial role in uplifting communities and societies, and Africa is no exception. However, philanthropy is often viewed as a one-way street, with donors from developing countries providing aid to African countries. To truly unlock potential of African philanthropy, we need to shift the narrative and take ownership of our own development by coming up with solutions that work for us and by raising local funds to solve systemic challenges. And that is why we have an incredible lineup of speakers today who are experts in the space and will identify what the opportunities are and how we all as Africans, whether in the diaspora or on the continent, can create more significant impact, leveraging our resources more effectively.
I always remember being a little kid, about 2, 3 years old, and after she'd taken care of all her children and made food and everything, my grandmother at about sort of in the afternoon, about sort of 6 when everything was done, would go out in the community. And she'd drag me along, because I was a baby, and we'd go and visit relatives. We'd see anyone who had passed away. She would go and see people who were sick, and she'd bring food. Or if someone had a child who was going to university in another country, maybe support them or help them. And I sort of tell this story because I think, you know, people say that philanthropy is kind of this Western, the word philanthropy is this kind of Western concept. But I sort of believe that Africa, we've always done philanthropy. It is part of our community, our families, our spirit. It is not new to us. It is embedded in us first. Philanthropy, to me, is an array of ways that you can be a philanthropist. And we have to include all of those in a big umbrella of what we mean. I just want to say I really support what the African Philanthropy Forum is doing, and my friend Mohsin here is doing. And I think what's so great about it is it's a really way to connect to the global community who want to work in philanthropy. And it's a way to communicate, to network, and to learn from each other.
Within your context, within your world and in your ecosystem, how is your audience defining philanthropy, and how are they engaging with philanthropy?
It's really about the giving of charitable, time and expertise, and the trend and the example I would give in the work that I do, because I work with individuals, not institutions, right? In terms, Alfonso, you are on the institutional side. With the work I do, work with individuals. When you look at a number of humanitarian crises that happen in Africa, the diaspora is one of the biggest contributors. When Ukraine happened, or a landslide in Sierra Leone, right? We are the first to throw money at something that happened in We Are the World, right? Was for Ethiopia, right? So that again is those who are outside who are supporting Africa. So from where I sit, philanthropy really means more of charitable, not just money, but also expertise.
The concept of philanthropy, as Harsh was saying, is something that in the Western world is interpreted very differently than in the Eastern world. And I often think about the value proposition that many people forget when we think about philanthropy. When you talk to wealthy people about where to invest, one of the first questions you get is, what is the value proposition? What is the benefit of my investment? And in some instances, it's difficult to explain that value proposition when we're talking about disjointed structural institutions. And I often think that there is a divide in the philanthropic world, depending on who you talk to. It's either a community-based philosophy or paradigm that you're operating in, or an individual one, right? You're either looking to invest because of the benefit that you're getting personally, or you're looking to invest because you have a community mindset. And you have to sort of assess who you're talking to and what their philosophy is as it relates to philanthropy.
APF mentioned that there's 9 billion in untapped philanthropy on the African continent. What does that mean in your context from an academic institution, from an academic lens? How are you working to really stratify the data, to make it cohesive, to be able to provide the input to what he's really talking about, which is the value, right?
What the data doesn't tell you is what's happening in the here and now. We can only look backwards, right? We can only tell you how much has come in the country in the last year, how much has come to health, to education, to infrastructure in the past year. What it doesn't tell you is that yesterday, a group of Sudanese students from across the UK came together and are taking medical supplies to hospitals across Khartoum right now, right? That we cannot be able to capture because a lot of the things that we put out there is responsive. It's exactly when it happens, we gather together, we pull it together, we fix an issue, and then that's done. And that's not documented in a way that we are able to track for a long time and to tease it out. And the other thing it doesn't tell you, and I really hope someone would spend some time and do this, is what Africa gives to the world.
The data that is requested is to acknowledge what has been invested by a third party. Therefore, it's always responding to a specific need, which is often external. So if we're not able to measure what we want to change, it means that a lot of the conversation in terms of a global Africa and the global philanthropy on the continent, or actually the African philanthropy on the continent, is not necessarily capturing those elements. If you think about the remittances that you mentioned, it does not necessarily reflect how this is solved. From a corporate perspective, one of the things that I'm saying is more corporate trying to be aligned with the core competencies. In Ghana, for example, one of the mining companies focused their work on malaria eradication because the community really needed that. So it's very responsive to the needs of the community to a certain extent. And that in itself reflects also the willingness of different communities to start to ask, what are you doing for us? So we need to ask ourselves the question of what is the need for philanthropy and what are the things that we need to change in our society so that we are less reliant on aid, but really reliant on capital that can transform communities.
For me, in the conversation we've had so far, it's leaning more into what is in it for us, right? Philanthropy, what happened to altruism?
When you say us, who is us?
Meaning from the institutional investor
Got
or
it.
from the
Okay.
corporate perspective.
What is the value proposition?
Right. It's always
Yeah.
what is the ROI I'm going to get for making that investment, or based on my line of work, I'm going to invest in. So it's sounding very strategic, and it's shifting away from altruism, which is the ability to give where need is required, regardless of my.
If you look at all the big names today that are we talk about in terms of philanthropy, they did not start as philanthropists. They ran successful businesses. They created jobs. When all this was done, they asked themselves, what else can I do in society? I've accumulated all that cash. I can do something else. So let's fix the creating African industries, making more people richer, building all this ecosystem, and say, okay, what else do we need to do? You can't donate if you're not making money.
So based on where you all sit, 30 seconds, what are the opportunities within the African philanthropic landscape?
So usually what tends to happen is we wait for Bill Gates to give money to Africa, then African billionaires will say, okay, I'll do that too, right? So given in Africa by wealthy individuals, or again, not just money, but also expertise for Africans, by Africans in Africa, to begin to shift a mindset that we're not a charity case. We also bring a lot of value to the table, and in giving, it doesn't have to be a big check.
I think for me, and it goes back to how we started, we called Africa Oxford Initiative deliberately. Everything else in Oxford is Oxford this, Oxford that, Oxford that. But we centered Africa deliberately, even in the naming. It's Africa Oxford Initiative. If you center what it is that you're focusing on, and you're very deliberate and intentional about that, and you're listening with humility on what the continent needs, you will most likely do good and do well?
I would say prioritize the value proposition through a sustainable lens and break down the silos of identity politics.